Well, I'd just like to say to all my fans out there who supported me for all these years, come to my shows, bought my records.
I'll always remember those days, those nights on stage.
George Strait, the king of country music, has always been known for his incredible talent and chart-topping hits. But behind all the fame and success, there's been one person who stood by his side through it all, the true love of his life. Now, George is opening up about the woman who shaped not only his heart, but his entire career. Her influence, support, and unconditional love have been a driving force in his journey. Who is this woman that stood out in George's life? In this video, we will look into George Strait's confession on who the love of his life is. George Strait's early life and family background. George Strait is not just known for his smooth country voice, but also for his simple, down-to-earth lifestyle that reflects his roots. Born in Texas, raised on a ranch, and growing up in a small town with big challenges, his story is as real as it gets. But before we dive into the details of his birth, it's interesting to note that George has lived a life largely free of controversy, which is pretty rare for someone in the spotlight for as long as he has been. Sure, in the music industry, everyone faces their share of whispers and rumors, but George has mostly kept his personal life out of the tabloids. Unlike some other celebrities, he's always managed to stay grounded, choosing a private life away from the noise. And how was he able to achieve that? Stay tuned to find out more details. One thing that might surprise people is how much George values his privacy. Even though he's been in the public eye for decades, he's rarely seen talking about his personal life. He's always been the kind of artist who lets his music do the talking. Despite his massive fame, George doesn't often give long personal interviews or get involved in the kinds of public drama that can dominate headlines. It's not that his life has been perfect or without challenges, but he's always managed to keep those moments private, which only adds to the respect many fans have for him. And in an industry where every detail of a star's life can be magnified, George has somehow maintained a level of mystery around his personal life that makes him even more appealing. Now, despite this image of George as a calm, controversy-free artist, his early years were far from smooth. This takes us back to May 18, 1952, when George Strait was born in Poteet, Texas, a small town not far from San Antonio. His parents, John Byron Strait Sr. and Doris Jean Kerr, were like many other hard-working folks trying to make ends meet. They lived in Pearsall, Texas, over in Frio County, and while it might not sound like much, this small-town upbringing would play a huge part in shaping who George became. His father was a junior high school math teacher, but outside of the classroom, he also owned a ranch near Big Wells, Texas. This wasn't just a side hobby either. Working on the ranch was a family affair. Weekends, summers, any spare moment they had, the family was out on the ranch, working hard. For George, this was normal life, and those experiences helped instill a work ethic that he carried into every part of his life. George wasn't the only child in the family. He had an older brother, Buddy, and a younger sister, Pensy. Unfortunately, life wasn't always picture-perfect for the Strait family. When George was just in the 4th grade, his parents divorced. His mother left the family, taking his sister with her. That meant it was up to George's dad to raise him and Buddy on his own. And while it wasn't easy, that time only strengthened the bond between George, his father, and his brother. The three of them worked together on the ranch, doing everything from fixing fences to taking care of the animals. Life on the ranch wasn't glamorous, but it taught George the value of hard work and responsibility, things that would later play a big role in his music career. That ranch life left a lasting impression on George. He never forgot what it was like to get his hands dirty and put in a full day's work. And even after he became famous, he stayed connected to those roots. In fact, even when he was selling out arenas and winning awards, George still spent time working on his ranch, managing the land, and caring for the livestock. It's that commitment to his roots that helped keep him grounded, even when fame came knocking. And this connection to ranch life also shows up in his music. Many of his songs reflect the values he learned growing up, which was hard work, honesty, and staying true to yourself. Growing up in Pearsall, Texas, George wasn't always into country music. In fact, like a lot of kids in the 1960s, he was drawn to rock and roll. When he was in high school, he played in a local rock band called the Stoics. At the time, bands like the Beatles were huge, and they were a major influence on George and his friends. For a while, he thought rock might be his path, but life had other plans. It wasn't until later that country music really started to capture his heart. The more live country music he heard, the more it started to resonate with him. Back then, George wasn't the kind of kid who grew up listening to country music all the time. It's funny because, despite becoming one of the biggest names in country music, George didn't even listen to much of it as a kid. He was more into news and farming reports on the radio. But that all changed when he started going to live shows in small Texas towns. Listening to country legends like Hank Thompson, Lefty Frizzle, and Merle Haggard changed everything for him. The stories they told, the authenticity in their voices, it all drew him in. And slowly but surely, George transitioned from rock to country music. But before his music career took off, George had another big change in his life. While he was still in high school, he met the love of his life, Norma Voss. It wasn't love at first sight exactly. They grew up in the same small town, but it wasn't until they went on a date that things started to click. After their first date, they didn't see each other for a while, but George quickly realized he missed her. He asked her out again, and that was it. They've been together ever since. In interviews, George has often said that Norma was his first love, and she's been by his side through everything, from his early days in the Army to his rise in the music world. In fact, they got married pretty young. On December 4th, 1971, George Strait and Norma eloped in Mexico. It wasn't a big, flashy wedding, but that's never been their style. Shortly after their wedding, George enlisted in the U.S. Army, so their time together was cut short, as he had to head off for training. Despite the challenges of military life, Norma stuck by him, supporting him every step of the way. They even had their first child, a daughter named Jennifer, in 1972 while George was stationed in Hawaii. Life in the military didn't stop George's love for music. While he was stationed at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii with the 25th Infantry Division, he found a way to keep performing. He joined an Army-sponsored country music band called Rambling Country. They performed on the military base and at local events, giving George a chance to refine his skills as a performer. It was during this time that he really started to develop his signature country style. And while military life had its challenges, it also taught George some important lessons: discipline, perseverance, and the ability to keep going even when things get tough. Those lessons would serve him well when he eventually made his way into the country music scene. After he was honorably discharged from the Army in 1975, George returned to Texas, ready to make music a bigger part of his life. But before he fully dove into music, he decided to go back to school. He enrolled at Southwest Texas State University, which is now called Texas State University, in San Marcos. At first, this might seem like a surprising choice for someone with such a passion for music, but George's connection to ranch life led him to pursue a degree in agriculture. Growing up on the ranch gave him a deep respect for land management and the importance of taking care of the land. It wasn't just about making a living, it was about maintaining a way of life that had been passed down through generations. That's something George has always cared about, even after he became famous. George's time studying agriculture wasn't just about getting a degree, it was also a way for him to stay connected to his roots. Even as he was preparing to launch his music career, he never lost sight of where he came from. And in 2006, Texas State University recognized George's contributions to both the music world and the agricultural community by awarding him an honorary doctoral degree. It was a fitting tribute to someone who has always been committed to giving back to his community. In fact, George's connection to agriculture runs so deep that in 1985, he established an endowment fund at his alma mater. The endowment supports the Freeman Ranch, a project that focuses on land and wildlife management, agricultural education, and scholarships for students. The Freeman Ranch is a testament to George's belief in the importance of preserving land and teaching future generations how to take care of it. It's clear that for George, music and ranching have always been intertwined. He's never seen them as separate parts of his life. Instead, they're two sides of the same coin. Don't miss the next scene where things get even more interesting. George Strait's successful music career. George Strait's journey into music started during his college days, but his love for it had already begun to take root much earlier. It was during his time at Southwest Texas State University that things began to get serious. While studying agriculture, George stumbled upon a local country band called Stony Ridge. The band needed a new singer, and George decided to give it a try. He didn't just join the band, he took over and made it his own, even going as far as renaming it to Ace in the Hole. The band started playing gigs at local bars and honky-tonks across Texas, slowly getting their name out there. It wasn't like they were an instant hit, but George was persistent. Even when their singles didn't catch on, he never gave up. He just kept pushing forward, always believing that something bigger was on the horizon. But it wasn't always easy for George and his band. While he was passionate about music, it wasn't paying the bills in the beginning. George was still working on his family's cattle ranch, splitting his time between that and his performances. There weren't many industry connections available for him at that point, so most of what he was doing was purely out of his love for music. But playing with Ace in the Hole wasn't just for fun, it was serious. George believed in what he and his bandmates were doing. That dedication would later pay off, but the road was long and full of obstacles. In fact, there were many times when it seemed like the odds were stacked against him. Still, George's determination kept him going. At some point, George formed a friendship with R.V. Woolsey, a bar owner who had some music industry experience. ERV saw something in George and began helping him navigate the music world. He introduced George to some industry experts from Music Row in Nashville. However, not everyone was convinced that George's traditional country style would sell. Country music at the time was leaning more toward pop influences, and George's sound didn't exactly fit in with the trends. But even though he faced several rejections, George didn't let it deter him. One of the biggest sources of encouragement during these tough times was his wife, Norma. She stood by him through it all, believing in his talent and pushing him to keep going, even when things seemed impossible. George and Norma were inseparable. Their family grew when their daughter, Jennifer, was born in 1972, followed by their son, George Harvey Strait Jr., known as Bubba, in 1981. But life wasn't always perfect for the Strait family. In 1986, tragedy struck when Jennifer died in a car accident at just 13 years old. It was an incredibly painful time for George and his family. Jennifer wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and she was thrown from the car during the accident. The loss was devastating. To honor her memory, the family started the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation, which focused on supporting children's charities in San Antonio. Even after the accident, George didn't stop making music. Although he avoided the media and refused interviews for several years following Jennifer's death, his passion for music never wavered. In fact, some of his biggest hits came during this difficult period. Between 1986 and the early 1990s, George released 11 consecutive #1 hits. He continued to pour his heart into his work, finding solace in music. His wife, Norma, continued to be a strong source of encouragement during these times. She convinced him to give his music career another shot when he was considering stepping back. George decided to take her advice, and that choice led to a major breakthrough. In February 1981, George signed a deal with MCA Records. It was only for one song at first, but that one song, Unwound, changed everything. The song climbed to #6 on the country charts, which was enough to secure George a long-term deal with MCA. This was a turning point for George's career. His debut album, Straight Country, was released later that year, and it stood out for its traditional country sound. While most artists at the time were leaning into pop country, George stayed true to his roots. His songs had a timeless quality that resonated with fans of old-school country music. Straight Country received positive reviews and helped establish George as a fresh face in the industry. Songs like Down and Out and If You're Thinking You Want a Stranger may not have been massive hits, but they showcased George's unique style and set the stage for what was to come. Critics appreciated the album for bringing back a more traditional sound, something that had been missing from the mainstream country scene. This was the beginning of George's steady rise to fame, and he wasn't about to slow down anytime soon. As the 1980s rolled on, George continued releasing albums that not only sold well, but also produced chart-topping hits. His second album, Straight from the Heart, was released in 1982 and featured his first #1 hit, Fool-Hearted Memory. It was the start of a long string of successful releases that would define George's career for the next several decades. George's ability to release hit after hit cemented his place in country music. He wasn't just a rising star anymore. He was becoming a major force in the industry. By the late 80s and early 90s, George had established himself as one of the biggest names in country music, with each new album selling over 1 million copies. As George moved into the 2000s, his success continued. In 2006, he marked 30 years in the music industry with the release of It Just Comes Natural. The album included 15 songs, 2 of which were co-written by his longtime friend and songwriter Dean Dillon. The album was well received, even getting a 4-star rating from People magazine. Then, in 2007, George released Wrapped, which became his 55th #1 hit, showing that even after decades in the business, he hadn't lost his touch. The following year, George released Troubadour, an album that earned him his first Grammy Award for Best Country Album. It was a huge milestone for George, who had already received countless awards throughout his career. Despite all the recognition, he remained humble and continued focusing on making music that stayed true to his country roots. In 2009, George received one of the highest honors in country music when he was named the Artist of the Decade by the Academy of Country Music. The award was presented to him by fellow country star Garth Brooks, and it was a testament to George's lasting influence on the genre. In 2010, Billboard named George the top country artist of the past 25 years, solidifying his legacy as one of the all-time greats. As George continued to release albums and rack up #1 hits, he also began scaling back his touring schedule. Around 2012, he announced that he would be retiring from full-time touring after his Cowboy Rides Away tour. Despite stepping away from the road, George wasn't done making music. In 2013, he released his album Love Is Everything, which included 2 #1 hits. He also won his 3rd Entertainer of the Year award from the Country Music Association that same year, proving that even after decades in the business, he was still at the top of his game. After his final tour, George turned his attention to other ventures, including performing regularly in Las Vegas. In 2015, he released his 29th studio album, Cold Beer Conversation, and showed no signs of slowing down. Even though he wasn't touring as much, George stayed active in the industry, finding new ways to connect with his fans. The most amazing part of the video is just ahead. George Strait's venture into acting. George Strait's career in music was already soaring when the idea of acting came his way. Known for his mix of traditional Texas music with heartfelt love songs, Strait became a favorite in country music circles. His popularity opened doors beyond just singing, and soon enough, he found himself in the world of movies. In 1992, Strait took on his first acting role in the film Pure Country. The movie featured Strait as Dusty, a country singer who had grown tired of the pressures that came with fame and success. It wasn't too far from Strait's own experiences, though Dusty's character was portrayed with more rebellion. Even though the role seemed to fit, Strait wasn't immediately sold on the idea of acting. He was hesitant to take on the project, feeling unsure about stepping into a new area he wasn't familiar with. But with some convincing from people like producer Jerry Weintraub and Elvis Presley's former manager, Colonel Tom Parker, Strait decided to give it a try. The script managed to strike a chord with him, and eventually he agreed to take on the role of Dusty. Despite his willingness to try acting, there were some parts of it he wasn't comfortable with. Strait was especially hesitant about the romantic scenes in the movie. Instead of doing kissing scenes with his co-star Isabel Glasser, they found a way to communicate the romance between the characters without needing to kiss. This helped make the process easier for Strait, who was stepping outside his comfort zone. Pure Country didn't perform exceptionally well in theaters, but over time, it gained a lot of popularity through home video. This unexpected success helped solidify George Strait's fame, not just as a musician, but also as someone who could hold his own in a film. Fans enjoyed seeing their favorite country star on screen, and Strait's portrayal of Dusty only strengthened the connection between him and his audience. While his acting career didn't take off with a string of movies, Pure Country left its mark, showing a different side of Strait to the world. Aside from his brief venture into acting, George Strait has always had a strong connection to the rodeo world. His first big rodeo performance happened in 1983 at the Houston Livestock Show, when the scheduled performer, Eddie Rabbitt, fell ill and Strait filled in. Since then, he has performed more than 20 times at the event, often in front of massive crowds. Rodeo quickly became a big part of his life, not just as a performer, but also through his involvement in team roping. Strait learned team roping on his own, becoming quite skilled at it over the years. His love for the sport extended to his family, too. His son, George Strait Jr., also known as Bubba, took up team roping and even competed in the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association. George was a proud father when he got to watch Bubba compete at the Houston Livestock Show in 2006, just before he himself performed. This love for the rodeo world and roping became a family affair, and it continued to influence their lives outside of music and acting. Strait even created the George Strait Team Roping Classic with his father and brother back in the 1980s, an event that continues to this day. In 2009, George Strait began to collaborate with Bubba in a new way. The father and son duo started writing songs together for George's album Twang, marking another milestone in their close relationship. Strait had already been a dominant force in country music for decades by then, but his work with Bubba brought a fresh dynamic to his career. By 2010, Strait had nearly 50 songs that hit the top of the Billboard Country Songs chart. Despite this incredible success, Strait never wavered from his classic country style. He avoided chasing trends and stuck to what he knew best, always delivering music that resonated with his fans. This dedication to staying true to himself was reflected in more than just his music. Strait's image as a rancher, always dressed in Western shirts, jeans, cowboy hats, and boots, became a signature look. It wasn't just for show either. This was who George Strait really was. His lifestyle off-stage mirrored the persona he presented to the public, and his fans loved him for it. His grounded, no-nonsense approach to his career kept him relevant and respected throughout the decades. Despite the ups and downs, Strait has built an impressive legacy. He's sold over 120 million records worldwide, with 33 platinum albums, 13 multi-platinum albums, and 38 gold albums, according to the RIAA. Even as he gets older, Strait continues to stay active, spending his time fishing, golfing, and vacationing in places like the Bahamas and Mexico. At the heart of George Strait's personal life is his long marriage to his first love, Norma. The two have been together for more than 50 years, and their bond has been a constant source of strength for Strait. Norma has always supported George throughout his career, even if she mostly stayed out of the spotlight. Her support was quiet but steady, and it's clear that their relationship played a huge part in Strait's success. While Norma rarely makes public appearances, she has shared a few special moments with George, like being present at the 1989 CMA Awards. The couple celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 2021, and Strait even performed his song "I Cross My Heart" for her during a concert in Las Vegas to mark the occasion. Norma's role in their family extended beyond just supporting George's career. While George was often away on tour, Norma stayed home to raise their son, Bubba. But after Bubba graduated and moved on to start his own family, Norma began to join Strait on the road. Now, they get to spend more time together, both on tour and with their grandchildren. Bubba and his wife Tamara have 2 children, George Harvey Strait III and Jillian Louise Strait, who are the pride and joy of their grandparents. There is no doubt that Norma was the true love of George Strait's life. What are your thoughts on the love life of George Strait? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Do not forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Click on the next video on your screen. You will enjoy it.